reporter here in Georgia who actually found Emily and interviewed her first. She was kind of the one who revealed her name to the world. In speaking with her and speaking with other outlets, she gave us a number. So we do know that, and she told me that there were more than a dozen people who've been recommended for indictments. That's a number we didn't know before. She confirmed with me that the report itself is 9 pages long. That's something that we didn't necessarily know before either. She confirmed that Mark Meadows did testify before the special grand jury. We knew that he had been ordered to do so by a South Carolina Supreme Court. She confirmed that he did, in fact, come testify for about 90 minutes and, in her words, didn't say much. She gave kind of a series of answers around whether or not the former president was on that list to be indicted. You can read from that what you will, but certainly more insight there. The issue of immunity is something that came up. That was something that wasn't necessarily discussed before. She told me that there were about a dozen people or so that came in, dozen witnesses that came in with immunity deals already in place. She wouldn't tell me the names. I tried to kind of see if I could qualify the witnesses. She said that they weren't necessarily names that you would recognize or that you would be familiar with. She also said that through the course of testimony, there was at least one person who was offered an immunity deal while they were in there testifying in hopes of compelling more honest testimony. So that was certainly an interesting piece of information as well. But I think the biggest thing is to kind of talk about, I asked her the mindset. I asked her if her fellow grand jurors seemed to grasp the gravity of this as well. Kind of talking about the mood inside the room, the fact that, again, she was the one who volunteered for this. Nobody really opposed her on that. And talking about the fact that, yes, at times there were a lot of people, other times there were few people. I did ask her about that kind of specific nugget that they put in, that line that said that they voted unanimously that there was no election fraud, no widespread election fraud here in the state of Georgia. She said she believed that that was important to put in because in many ways that was kind of the entire underpinning of this investigation, and they felt that that was important to include that in that report as well. Nicole.
Andrew Weissman, I want your thoughts on all of it, but let me just start with this very narrow and then we'll broaden it out. I mean, if Mark Meadows, in her words, didn't say much, is it a reasonable hunch to suspect that he has not become a cooperating witness in this probe?
Yeah, that is a very reasonable hunch that he asserted the Fifth, he asserted attorney-client privilege, which, by the way, the grand juror went out of her way to say with respect to Rudy Giuliani that that is his right. She was very good on understanding the instructions about what legal privileges are and what is somebody's right to do. She was very good about understanding the difference between making a mistake versus intentionally lying. But to your question, I think it's pretty clear at this point that Mark Meadows, he is somebody who Jack Smith and probably Fani Willis are very much focused on. And he, if I were either of them, I would be lining up a federal and state indictment if you can prove it, and put pressure on him to try and cooperate.
And what do you make of what we understand now? I said to Blaine, I thought of Jim Comey when I heard her talk about other tapes. And I worked in politics for 9 years. I'd never heard of anybody recording each other. And clearly a lot of people recorded Donald Trump. And potentially that is what one does when there are questions of criminality by him all the time, swirling. But the fact that there are multiple people that they recommended indictments for, that means criminal proceedings potentially imminent now for multiple people, potentially, including the president, ex-president.
Yeah, well, it is important to remember that we're talking about one juror, not 24, and that this was just the special grand jury that made recommendations. It's still up to the DA to decide who she thinks should be charged, and it will be a normal, regular grand jury that will have to make that decision. So we're still a number of steps away because the DA has an independent judgment, as the special grand jury recognized, but it does appear, and I agree with Harry, that if there are these recommendations, it does put a lot of pressure on the DA to, really take that as some weight that has to be given. There is one thing, Nicole, I wanted to just point out is that struck me, and I know Barb McQuaid made a similar point to me, was that one of the things that the grand jurors said was that She was doing something while she was, I think, eating a popsicle that she got from a party with the DA's office. And of all of the things that she said, that was the thing that I thought that whoever gets charged is going to use to, as Harry said, none of this is helpful. It may not hurt at the end of the day, but it's not helpful. I was somewhat.
Let's move forward real quick. There was something on here that I wanted to look at. Right here.
Into the attempted coup plot by Donald Trump and specifically the ex-president's role of it. The New York Times just in the last few minutes dropped a story that reports that special counsel Jack Smith has subpoenaed Donald Trump's daughter Ivanka and his son-in-law Jared Kushner. That's according to two people familiar with the matter from that New Times story. Quote, the decision by the special counsel underscores how deeply into Trump's inner circle Mr. Smith is reaching and is the latest sign that no potential high-level witness is off limits. It is unclear whether Mr. Trump will seek to block Ms. Trump and Mr. Kushner from testifying on the grounds of executive privilege, as he has tried with some other witnesses. Both of them served as White House officials in the Trump administration. Mr. Trump declined to try to stop them from testifying before the House Select Committee that investigated the January 6th attack and everything that led to it. Harry, this feels significant, and yet from Trump's perspective, which I hate to even utter that phrase, he did permit them to speak, it would appear, without many parameters to the congressional committee.
Yeah, but that doesn't undermine the significance, though, at all. And
So explain
really,
the significance.
Okay, the headline is, once again, Smith uncowed by any witness and going for the jugular. You have Ivanka.
After Adam Schiff and Liz Cheney. I mean, I get it, but he's not the first person to have a bite at them.
No, but he's the guy who has the power, but he could be prudent, think it over, etc. And maybe he even was. But this is, in addition, another indication we are in the end game. Why does he want Ivanka and Jared? They were in the center of things, especially Ivanka, on January 6th. So it's just more indication, A, Trump is in the crosshairs, and B, he's going forward aggressively without fear or favor. In that sense, it's of a piece with Mark Meadows, who might be even more important, but it reaffirms what we were thinking, and it's one more indication that he's farther along, not simply in Mar-a-Lago, but especially in the January 6th welter of cases, and that, I think, is the headline here.
He's had the January 6th Select Committee transcripts. I think these were among the transcripts they handed over for 2 months. Why not go to them first? I mean, Ivanka, as you said, seems central to understanding what went on with the phone call with Trump and Pence.
Well, he surely has gone to them first. Now, she was a little bit equivocal, right? She would allow as to maybe, for example, the big call with Pence, it was spirited or something like that. He wants to know the words, and I don't think the January 6th committee plumbed the depths of the many times people were saying, you got to stop him, you're the only one. And so, you know, plus he's a prosecutor.
So his centrality in terms of his unique ability to stop the violence.
Yes, and anyone he's going to put on, he needs to get the testimony from in case they go south. He wants to have it. It won't be enough to say, well, in the January 6th committee. So this shows that she's a potential witness here in
Against
the
her
actual
father.
Against
It's
her father.
It's amazing. We're joined now by Mike Schmidt, New York Times Washington reporter who broke this news. Mike, take us through what you're reporting.
We're basically reporting about the next movement in this investigation, the fact that Jack Smith wants to have, Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump testify before a grand jury. I was thinking back on the different investigations into Trump. I think this is the first time that I can recall that either of them have been asked to testify before a grand jury. It's obviously a different environment than simply sitting down and being interviewed by prosecutors or agents the way that Kushner was during the Mueller investigation. And the biggest question, I think, here is what will Trump do? As you were pointing out, yes, Trump did allow them, or I don't know, that's probably not the right way of saying it. Trump didn't try and stop them from speaking before the January 6th committee. What will he do here? We know that he has become very obsessive about these investigations. in recent months. He's obviously in a different place today than he was when the congressional investigation was going on. His legal criminal liability is even more to the forefront as all of these different sprawling investigations unspool locally and at the federal level. So what will he do? Will he try and stop them from testifying? It seemed like they willingly went in to meet with the January 6th committee. The January 6th committee was able to use their testimony very effectively. I think, they kept on playing that clip of Ivanka Trump talking about how she did not think that there was election fraud, sort of endorsing the view of Bill Barr. They were constantly playing these clips, and Jack Smith showing, look, whether it's Mike Pence or the president's son-in-law and daughter, he's not afraid to reach as far into Trump's inner circle as possible.
Mike, there's some reporting in the story that I want to see if you can sort of tell us if you have any indication that these are of specific interest to Jack Smith. You write that Ms. Trump was in the Oval Office on January 6th as her father placed a late morning call to Pence to pressure him to block or delay congressional certification of the Electoral College results, documenting Joe Biden's victory. As president of the Senate, Pence, who rejected Trump's demands, was to serve in a ceremonial role. Is there anything to be read into the importance of, I know one of the chronicled challenges of other investigations into Trump was that lack of firsthand witnesses to the criminal act. Is Ivanka a potential window into what Trump actually said and did and why he said it?
Of course she is. Look, Jack Smith wants to talk to everyone who was interacting with Trump in this period of time to understand what were the true motivations behind what he was doing. That's why he wants to talk to Mike Pence, and that's why he wants to talk to Jared and Ivanka. I think we have a pretty good sense from them, from the transcripts of their interview before the January 6th committee, about what they would say. And remember, they can't really deviate from what they said to Congress because that would raise questions about the accuracy of that testimony. So, look, if you're Jack Smith, you want to know everything Trump was saying, whether it helps build a case or doesn't, because no matter what happens, you need to know what he was saying and doing, because if he was saying things that would potentially undermine a criminal charge, that's really important information for a prosecutor to have, because that information would have to be disclosed at a trial. So you want a 360-degree view of what Trump was doing and saying, not just the things that help get you to the charge, but the things that also may cut against it. Because at the end of the day, that will all come out if you were to indict and go to trial.
Mike, there's an interesting sort of final note here that you write this quote. It's a Trump, what do we call them? Truth. It's so ironic I can barely say that, but this is something Trump distributed on his platform, Truth Social. Quote, contrary to fake news reporting, I never asked Jared or Ivanka to be part of the 2024 campaign for president, and in fact, specifically asked them not to do it, Trump wrote, going on to say the campaign would be, quote, too mean and nasty. Is that to be read by anyone as cutting them loose? I think he tweeted that after they were known to have testified before the Select Committee.
I don't know what he means by what he's saying. I can't make sense of that. It's clear that they don't have it, at least based on sort of what we know, they're not in the room with Trump every day the way they were in the White House. Besides that, what does the inner workings of the Trump family look like post-White House? I don't have a great sense of it. I'm not sure if Trump was, I'm not sure what that message or tweet or whatever posting was about or what he was trying to say. At the end of the day, these were people who were around Trump for some of the most critical moments of his presidency, and to have access to those people, it would be a pretty extraordinary thing. It was extraordinary when the January 6th committee spoke to them, and it will be extraordinary if they ultimately, are able to get their testimony.
Fixing to rattle the cage. That's what's fixing to happen. Going to get down to the bottom of it. Going to figure out what's going on. Who knew it? Why it went on? How many people was involved in it?
Disposal than Jack Smith has is to prove is to get at intent by proving knowledge of defeat. Ivanka did, if nothing else, she did that quite effectively. She made clear she saw the 2020 election the same way Bill Barr did, that her father had lost. The Times reporting also reminds us that she went with her father to the Ellipse. Now, she may or may not remember what happened on the Ellipse an hour before deadly insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. It seems like a weird thing to forget. She's a young woman, younger than me, and I remember every moment of that day. But just speak to her specifically as a fact witness in the room for both her father acknowledging defeat potentially and his knowledge of violence and his enthusiasm for going there and witnessing it.
Well, I think she was so close to him. Obviously, she was an unpaid employee, but also very close to her father. All of the other witnesses really described her as the one person who could get to the ex-president. So I think that she has insight into his mood, into his intent, that is very important, and I think will be likely more fully explored in a grand jury setting. And I think memories will become clearer likely in a grand jury setting.
Congresswoman, correct me if I have this wrong, but I believe the committee also marshaled evidence of Ivanka's assistant describing Ivanka's reaction to what she heard her father say to Trump, specifically the words. It was one he used to describe where he could grab women because he's famous. Is understanding Ivanka's reaction to Trump's call with Pence to the degree that it was so upsetting to Ivanka that her assistant provided sworn testimony to your committee of Ivanka's trauma from hearing her father call Pence that word. Is that assumed to be part of this prong of Smith's probe?
Well, I don't know. I mean, the special counsel is pursuing things that he thinks are important, but it was not just with Ivanka, but other witnesses. The assistants seem to have a clearer memory than the principal in some cases. So we'll see what happens in the grand jury.
And is it an assumption? I mean, the problem is that your investigation happened in public, so we like to lay over it, but it does seem that at least now DOJ is following some of your leads, and maybe DOJ defenders would say they're their own leads, but it is true that you spoke to Jared and Ivanka first. Is it a safe assumption that they've reached the assistants first already and that this testimony will have to sync up if they're not to be in danger of perjury?
Well, I don't know. We don't have information on all the witnesses that appear, nor should we. Certainly, the transcripts of all of the assistants are available to them. They were made with the understanding that lying to the Congress was a crime. So I think, they can rely on that. Whether they needed to also call those witnesses in, that's a decision they would have to make. But I think that the being called into a grand jury is no small thing. You answer under penalty of perjury. You can be at risk if you don't tell the whole truth. And so this is a serious matter.
I want to switch gears to the matter that your committee also spent a good deal of time on and care, as I understand, as it's been reported and as you and I have talked about, and that's the security footage. Excuse me, there are tapes taken from multiple angles on that day. Tucker Carlson isn't just any cable host. He's one with a lot of viewers, but he's also one who in the Dominion lawsuit has now been outed as knowingly lying to his viewers and doing it for ratings and out of fear of Newsmax and other outlets. He's also someone who for months peddled conspiracy theories about January 6th. What are your concerns, and you can take as much time as you need, about that person being the one who is now holding all those hours of security footage?
Well, I think it's pretty strange that the one person given, in his words, unfettered access to all the video was not, the general news media, but essentially a propagandist. We know from the Dominion lawsuit that he knowingly lies to his viewers, and certainly has done so about January 6th as well. It's our understanding he has not been handed a hard drive with all this video. He's been given access over at the Capitol, but he said that he intends to air some of the video on his show next week. So, there's a lot we don't know about how the speaker has arranged his access. We just have Mr. Carlson's representation that he will be showing a video. And I have concerns about that. I mean, the committee was very careful. The only people who had access to the video were the members of the committee and select staff. It was very carefully controlled, and none of the video was shown unless we had agreement from the Capitol Police that it would not endanger security of the Capitol. It's not clear to me that procedure is in place, and certainly the representation Mr. Carlson has made would seem to indicate it is not. There's a lot of material that could jeopardize security of the Capitol, the escape routes. There are gaps, actually, in the placement of some of the cameras. One of the recommendations we made was that those gaps be eliminated through the placement of additional cameras. I sure don't want the bad guys to know where the gaps are, how the members of Congress and the staffs were evacuated. And there's another issue here, which is we know that the ex-president's supporters take his word as true, and they act upon his words. He has belittled the Capitol Police, in some cases suggested they are not honorable or called one a murderer. Exposing the identity of all the Capitol Police publicly could put some of them at risk to some of the wild adherents of the ex-president. It's a concern I have.
I mean, it's not far-fetched. I mean, over here on Earth One, more than 1,000 people stand criminally charged. One militia group of seditious conspiracy against these United States of America, the Proud Boys still standing trial. Tucker Carlson and Vladimir Putin, I think in the same news cycle, started rewriting or shifting the pivot, the frame around Ashley Babbitt to that of a martyr. There is a lot of work that's gone into rewriting January 6th. There's not an ordinary court. That's
Well, I got bad weather outside. It looks like this may not work out. Sorry about that. It was a fairly interesting story about Donald Trump and the son and the daughter being called in for
Therapist to his office. Clearly, we saw, I mean, you don't have to buy the book. I mean, you can go to the GPO website and see a violent mob attacking police officers, trying to keep them from gaining entry to the Capitol. There's no way to make that look nice, make that look like a tourist visit. You're right that Carlson has repeated the same kind of propaganda that Putin has. And that's a concern, that that kind of propagandist is being granted unfettered access to what could be very sensitive video.
You've been so generous with your time, and when news breaks, we always make you multitask for us, and we're grateful. But I just want to ask you if you can remember if there were any Republicans who didn't run alongside Democrats that day. There's the famous footage, thanks to the committee, of Josh Hawley running faster and farther than anybody else. But it seems that any effort to selectively edit would have to be really selective and really edited, because everything we saw before our eyes was that Republicans and Democrats all ran for safety. What in their wildest delusions would they be trying to depict that shows something else?
I don't know. I mean, getting to really a tragic death that this poor woman was under the belief that the president wanted her to break into the Capitol. She'd broken a window, was trying to crawl through into the speaker's lobby. Well, the members of Congress were about 40 feet away being evacuated. So, it was a mixed crowd, Republicans and Democrats. I was there with a lot of Republican members and the police trying to usher us to safety. There's no way to make Democrats the only ones at risk, and we should not approach this in that way. This is about the United States of America. United we stand. It's our Congress that we need to preserve as the legislative branch. We can't allow a portion of government to be put at risk by bad guys, and anything that would make the legislative branch more vulnerable is not something we should endorse.
Congresswoman Zalapkin, thank you so much today of all days for being with us. We're really grateful.
Thank you.
Let me bring into our coverage Carol Leonnig, Washington Post national investigative reporter who knows more about this specific part of this story than just about anybody. Also joining us, former Republican Congressman David Jolly, who retains more ability to understand this version of the Republican Party than I do. Harry is still with us. Carol, your thoughts on this extraordinary move, even by McCarthy standards, to turn over the security footage to Tucker Carlson?
You know, in a normal situation, Nicole, I would say any reporter, no matter their bent, no matter the platform on which they stand, I would say if a reporter can get access to video and evidence held by Congress, have at it. I certainly view it that way when I'm able to get information from Congress that other people aren't. However, in this situation, Tucker Carlson has proved himself multiple times to have crossed far beyond the natural ethical lines of a reporter, including giving his viewers information that he knows to be false. And frankly, from my perspective, some of the things that his program has aired would have led to the firing of employees at my institution if they had been engaged in it. I'm thinking specifically on the issue of the use of video and photographic evidence. You may remember this, Nicole, you may not. Your memory is stunningly good, so I'm going to say you do remember. But in the summer of 2020, there were allegations of fires burning out and riots and terrible people carrying guns and attacking civilians in Portland and in Washington State, in Seattle, and elsewhere. Folks who were protesting against George Floyd's death, but also against basically racism in police departments that led to fatal shootings and killings of unarmed Black men and women. And in those events, certainly there were riots, there was violence. Tucker Carlson's program, however, aired mishmash photographs and video that pretended as if Black individuals were holding rifles and shotguns against the backdrop of a city on fire. Those were identified by photographers who took those photographs as basically an amalgam of multiple images. And the worry there is that it's a fabrication. It's a fabulous version of reality, and it had no connection to reality. It was to stoke fear about attacks on cities by Black Lives Matter protesters that didn't reflect anything about what was happening in those cities.
Yeah, I mean, David, Carol brings the receipts, but we now, thanks to Dominion, have Tucker Carlson in his own words acknowledging lying to his viewers so that Newsmax, who was breathing down their throats in the days after Donald Trump lost, didn't beat them, that he's terrified and basically a hostage of his own excellent ratings.
Yeah, Nicole, I think this is a defining moment of Kevin McCarthy's speakership, not just in the early months, but probably over the next 2 years. I mean, this is Kevin McCarthy's posturing as a J6 apologist. He will likely be known for a few things. It will be releasing security tapes into the public that jeopardize the security of the U.S. Capitol, a witch hunt against Hunter Biden, and probably shutting down the government or defaulting on the debt. We can kind of forecast that. But I think the examination, if you will, of what this means about Kevin McCarthy is this. We often project him, I do personally, as being held hostage by the MAGA insurrectionist wing. He did not need to do this for the insurrectionist wing. He did this because he believed it was the right thing to do. And so this shifts our analysis of Speaker McCarthy now from someone held hostage by the insurrectionist wing to someone who's fully a member of it. And we really have to think about that. I mean, what he did in terms of the lens of capital security and national security, there's really no excuse for it. It shows him to be an incredibly weak speaker and someone who answers to some really untoward voices within the party and within conservative media, and not to the interest of the nation.
Carol, I don't want to let you go without getting your thoughts on Jack Smith's subpoena of Jared and Ivanka Trump.
Well, you couldn't get closer to the heart of what.
And you know, that's a big deal whenever he said, in the interest of the nation. That really means a lot. Because that's the primary purpose for the American people hiring those people in office to begin with, is in the better interest of the nation. And to cause this kind of a ripple, this kind of disturbance, yeah, I don't blame McCartney in going after these people towards wanting to get subpoenas from them and have them sit down in sworn court or a hearing and wanting to know what they know. And if I'm not mistaken, there's probably going to be one even being thrown towards Mr. Pence. This is a big deal. This isn't something that you just take your painted brush and just brush over like it's some sort of mistake in an artistry towards drawing out a picture. These are people's lives. This is just about as serious gets whenever it comes to public affairs, public service. And, you know, it's reached a level, I believe, that if we allow for this to go on without it being really, really scrutinized, I don't know that it will be punished, but at least people will be able to get down to the bottom of everything. Then if we don't get to the bottom of this, acting as if that it wasn't no big deal, then it will happen again. Or possibly even again. And the next time that it happens, if it happens, which God forbid if it does happen, but the next time that it happens, if it happens, it could be a whole lot worse than people climbing up the walls of the Capitol and beating down windows and becoming violent to the point that somebody got shot and 2 or 3 other ones committed suicide and 2 or 3 other ones, actually several of them was hospitalized because of pepper spray and etc. I mean, this was a big deal. People are right now spending a great sum of their time in their life in prison because of this. So it's reached a point with our law enforcement that if they don't pursue this in a adequate, sufficient type way, first of all, it's going to be making a mockery out of our laws. Second of all, it's going to be displaying a message that if certain people got away with this time, who's to say that they're not going to try it again, or again, or again? There has to be order in government, just like there has to be order in church affairs. Our structure was set up onto by order. And whenever things becomes no longer in order, then we got chaos. We got anarchy. We got criminal crimes that's being committed. And that's exactly what they're wanting to get to the bottom of. They're wanting to find out, without a shadow of a doubt, who knew what, when they knew it, how they knew it, and etc. Because all these things makes all the difference in the world in identifying and holding people to account. And if we don't, then like I said a while ago, our laws will be looked upon as being nothing but a mockery. And then God only knows what'll happen next, which I hope that it don't, but let's say that if it did, it would be possibly a trillion zillion times worse than this event. And the only reason why this event didn't wind up being horribly bad was because they didn't go in there blazing with guns, and they wasn't organized like they should have been in a group of people that was going to do something like this. If this would have been the Muslims doing this, or the Black Panthers doing this, or even another type group, do you not think that it would have been appalling? Sure it would have. And it's nothing any different than the Proud Boys or whoever else was involved in all this stuff towards accountability issues. And I've heard them say, and I've heard them say, and I've heard them say on the news again and again and again, that it's kind of, what's the right word that I'm looking for? Anti-productive in going after everybody that basically broke the law that day, but not going after the people that orchestrated that event to be done. It's really non-productive. Why do you want to go after the ones on the bottom end if you're not going to hold the ones on the top end accountable?
Well, you couldn't get closer to the heart of what former President Donald Trump was thinking and saying than his daughter, who was described in our book about this horrific moment as the president's show pony. She was the person brought around to sort of calm the president down, to kind of get him less riled up and excited about a riot on the Capitol grounds that was threatening the lives of police officers and members of Congress, but to try to get him cool, calm, and willing to tape a message to his viewers. I couldn't agree more with Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren about what the possibilities are for Jack Smith in terms of pressing beyond what the committee was able to get. Under threat of perjury, under threat of being charged with false statements. I'm not suggesting that anybody in the Trump family is looking to do that, but under that threat, people are a little more evocative and more mindful and memoryful about what actually happened. There was a moment that I had to giggle during the testimony of Ivanka, because she said she wanted to know where something came from when she was questioned by the committee. And they pointed to our book and said, it came from this book in which you said this is what you did on that day. So memories can be brought back when a federal subpoena for testimony is served.
And only someone trying to keep their story straight has to say, wait, who did I tell that to? An amazing day of news. I'm sorry we did not have more time. It is lovely to have you at the table. Thank you very much for being here. Carol Leonnig, David Jolly, and Harry, thank you so much. When we come back, our friend, my dear colleague, Ali Velshi, will be part of our next panel. He is, as you all know by now, live in Ukraine. He visited one of the most brutally hit areas of that country today. We're going to ask him all about it the next hour of Deadline White.
That's one of the reasons why that I document everything, or try to document everything, even having sometimes private conversations with people, because
and the Ukrainians have a lot to show for their resilience in the fight that they've put up.
Because I don't want things misconstrued or taken out of context, and that's exactly what happened in 2005 whenever I was handing some Bible material to a teller up here at a convenience store in Weakley County in Martin, Tennessee, and I told him that there was a great deal of problems in my life and that there was going to be an explosion of controversy, and that I liable to wind up on the Channel 6 News on account of it. Whenever those police officers left Martin, Tennessee and drove all the way to Huntington, Tennessee to pick me up while I was at work, with it being non-assisted, even though they had jumped county lines. Besides that, I don't know that a Martin PD only has authority only in the town of Martin. It would be total chaos if everybody just done whatever that they wanted to do. Once more, everything is handled in an authorian type form And if it was something that substantial, they should have got the county Mountie. I believe, I may be wrong, they should have got the county that has a much more arm distance than the city, than the town. And then once they got to Huntington, they should have contacted the authorities there. That way, the arrest should have been witnessed by one of their authorities in Carroll County before they drugged me back to Martin. And none of the above happened. I couldn't believe that a Martin PD would actually drive from Martin, Tennessee to Huntington, basically going over two different county lines just to be able to get to me. Because at the time, I was working for a body shop, Jimmy Darnell and David Lloyd, there in Huntington, Tennessee. First Choice, I believe, was the name of them. But it goes back to everything needs to be done orderly. And if it's not done orderly, that means it's done disorderly. And if it's disorderly, that means somebody either isn't following the rules, or somebody has broken the rules, or somebody is just making up rules. And whenever you have an establishment such as the United States government that's operating that way, then you have people committing crimes.
I remember that you were still there. I remember when the Bucha story broke, and I remember pressing U.S. officials about it. It was the first time I ever saw John Kirby choke up. I mean, he's had that job for years and years. But what I have heard privately is that Ukrainians fear there are a whole lot of Bucha-like crimes against humanity that have gone on that we don't have eyes on yet. Some closer to the front, some perhaps in Mariupol and other regions. How extensive is the war crimes and crimes against humanity investigation in Ukraine today?
Well, you remember one of the points about Mariupol was that there may have been thousands of people like this, but these are areas that were under Russian control, and we wouldn't know. And we have subsequently learned that there are burn pits, and there are ways that the Russians went out of their way to cover up whatever happened. So the estimate of the number of people dead in this country ranges from 8,000 civilians to 30,000 civilians. Again, we're not talking about military participants. Those people have also died. The difficulty with crimes against humanity, which is something that the vice president brought up at the Munich Security Conference, is that they're harder crimes to prove. War crimes are easier to prove. The stuff in Bucha is easier to prove because soldiers are not supposed to kill unarmed soldiers. They're not supposed to kill people whose hands are bound. They're certainly not supposed to kill civilians under any circumstances. They took up quarter in their houses, which is something they're not supposed to do. Those are easy to prove because if you have witnesses and you have video, you can determine that a soldier or a commander is guilty of something. War crimes and crimes against humanity are organized. They have an intent, and the intent is harder to prove. It's impossible to prove if you don't have somebody defeated, or if the perpetrator is the victor of a war. They're impossible to prosecute if you don't arrest somebody and they don't face justice. So the war crimes discussion is important, and it's one that the Ukrainians are trying to further, but it is really a difficult conversation because you actually have to charge people who are in decision-making authority as opposed to the soldiers and the commanders. But either way, there's a lot of evidence in this country by a lot of organizations and international organizations that war crimes and atrocities have been committed.
Ambassador Taylor, I remember
not only was they doing that, but they was raping some of the women, some of the girls. They was committing heinous acts, cruelty as far as killing or raping some of the people while they had the parents tied up that had to witness that. Shooting them in the head with their hands tied. I mean, these are all heinous acts of war crimes that even the Russian government was fully aware of before they committed this stuff. It ain't like that they wasn't aware of other people that has stood in front of the international tribunal courts and given account towards war crimes. They're fully aware of that. And to watch them go after innocent men, women, and children, civilians, the way that they did, it's unexcusable. It's absolutely unexcusable. As far as I'm concerned, they ought to take every damn one of them and have trials on them, and they ought to be tried to the fullest extent of the laws, even at the extent of being put to death because of what that they have done. That's how bad in what that they have done. And it wouldn't be no different than it would have been if it would have been somebody in your neighborhood that was blowing up your streets and blowing up your citizenship and all the buildings around you and factories and etc., and then turn around and come in and then village the people as far as raping and taking what you want to take and etc. That's where the United States military has always tried. I realize probably during the Civil War there was probably some cases that they got away with that they shouldn't have had, but it was probably just as much on the north as it was the south that was committing these type of violations. But that's where our military, United States military, has always tried to steer clear of this type of vigilante, unmerciful type genocide, because now you no longer have a military that represents good. Now you have a barbaric, heathenistic group of people that's basically just doing whatever the hell they want to do to whoever that they want to do it to. And it wouldn't be no different than some of the other incidences that we've seen in other countries where they have brought condemnation to their own people, that America had to step in and stop it and put an end to it. The only difference is today we're dealing with a country, a superpower, that has nuclear bombs, that has already done threatened to use those bombs, and now it's basically tied our hands to the degree that we really don't know which way to handle this situation. We know that it's all 100,000% wrong in breaking all the Geneva agreements that was made after World War II. We know that what we've all seen it on live TV and what that they have partaken in for the past year. So there's no question at hand towards what's happened, past tensively speaking. Now the question at hand is, how is the world going to handle this? Because whenever it comes to the Russian military, the Russian government asking for it from the rest of the international world, they've already done crossed that line. They have crossed that line again and again and again. And it's almost as if certain individuals in the Russian government has basically become suicidal. And it's one thing to become suicidal to yourself, and it's another thing to become suicidal to your own people, to your own party. And that's exactly what that they have brought. They have brought a bloody, ugly stain to the rest of the citizens, the good people that are in Russia, that now, if push comes to shove, they may be part of the collateral damage to be roughed up or even destroyed, just to be able to get to those that are guilty. So it really puts not only America, but it puts the world in a very, very unpredictable, precarious, difficult situation to be in, because now you got to weigh out the lesser of the two evils. Kind of like with the deal with Donald Trump and the January 6th deal, you got to weigh out the lesser of the two evils. Is it going to be worse to sit back and not do nothing about the war crime atrocities that's been committed upon to the Ukrainians? Or is it even going to be worse to go after these people, to hold them accountable for doing what that they have done, acting in such a barbaric, heathenistic, cruel, insensitive way? Once more, you're dealing with somebody that's got nuclear armament. It's not cut and dry like it would be if you was dealing with Libya or some other third world country that barely was standing on its own feet. You're dealing with somebody that already had made a mark in the eyes of the global international society, the alliances, that now has basically lost his freaking mind. Literally lost his freaking mind. And to think that those other people, whenever he was having that meeting the other night, and all those other oligarchs was sitting there taking it all in, and they was just acting like that they was just goody-goody two-shoes, and how that they was saluting and applauding their grand master, their grand wizard, is absolutely sickening to see something like that on live TV, to the degree that it almost becomes a full-fledged conspiracy, which a conspiracy only requires two or more people embarked upon to the same ideal or the same thing. That it's a sickening conspiracy, and watching, I don't know how many, probably several hundred people that was in that room whenever Putin was making his little speech right before our president made his speech, and to sit there and witness all them other people in there that either wasn't screaming and hollering or being loud towards trying to put Putin in his place, to sit there and watch those people act the way that they did, you have to start asking yourself a question: has the whole damn bunch drinking out of the same damn well? Have they all become lunatics? Have they all lost their minds? Are they under this type of hypnotic possession, pretending to spiritually being possessed to the degree that nobody is willing to speak up or say anything against their personal leader? You see, if you look at the heavenly kingdom, just bear with me just for a second. If you look at the heavenly kingdom, if God and the holy angels would have sat idly by and let the devil do what the devil wanted to do in the way that the devil wanted to do it, pertaining to Lucifer, without there being a struggle, a fight, or even a battle, according to the book, according to the good book, there was war in heaven. If God allowed for that to have occurred and didn't try to stop it, that would have made God just as guilty as the perpetrators that was trying to overthrow the kingdom of God. Because God is a fair God and a just God, and God stands on various commitments pertaining to how things are supposed to be run, either in the spirit world or in our world. God stood up and put an end to it. He drew a line in the sand and said, you know what, Lucifer, you're never going to be permitted back in the kingdom of God. A matter of fact, not only are you not going to be permitted in the kingdom of God, but you're going to suffer immensely because of what that you have done. Because you know that if you done this, what the consequences was going to be. And that's the reason why Jesus explicitly said what he has said, in which I know it's difficult for people to actually consume this the way that it needs to be consumed. But Jesus said, let it be known in their law, the law of the wicked, that they violated me, or they challenged me, or they rebelled against me for no cause. For no cause. Why was it a no cause? Because the rules have already been established in the heavenly kingdom. To whom much is given, much is required. And whenever Lucifer and the angels that followed Lucifer, that no longer are angels but are evil demonic spirits, whenever they done what they done, They knew without a shadow of a doubt, according to the righteous holy God, the God that still sits on the throne of heaven, the kingdom of heaven, pertaining to the great Jehovah, they knew that whenever they done that, that they was basically going to be casting their own death sentence. So because they was casting their own death sentence, they was trying to bring destruction and death to the immortals down here. Now, they tried to convince a lot of people that in reality, they was for us. I guarantee you, Lucifer and those that followed after Lucifer from the kingdom of God being exiled from the kingdom has never been for the Homo sapiens. They have always been for themselves in trying to use the Homo sapiens as a ploy or a playing card, or you can use it this way in a terminology towards a pawn, like playing chess, that they was using the Homo sapiens to basically win over on the decision that they had made thousands of years ago in proving their case. And the only thing that they have done is continuously dug their hole a little deeper, not just for the spirit concept world, but also for the Homo sapiens. They have basically led us down this road of doom and gloom to the point of the oil, petroleum companies, the gas companies out there, that without a doubt we are damaging this planet. And if you don't believe me, all you got to do is turn on the weather and see how ridiculously crazy that our weather patterns have become, not just here in the Western world on one continent, but on all 7 continents. The weather patterns are out of charts towards what they normally are or should be. I don't even know really and truly why they even still produce the almanac over here in America. I guess it still does have benefits as far as the qualities of knowing when to mark hogs, knowing when to cut hogs, knowing when to plant. Don't plant at this different moon cycle. Don't plant at that different cycle. I mean, all those things is still effective to some degree. But whenever it comes to them forecasting that it's going to be a hard winter or a soft winter or a mild winter or not no winter, they really don't know right now. The almanac don't know, because it's become that erratic. Chaotic is what it's become. And the more chaoticness that the people become, the more chaotic that the spirit world becomes, pertaining to good versus bad, bad versus good. And it's basically totally upside down to the degree that right now we're seeing so many innocent lives being damaged and suffering on account of this. Just like what's going on over in Ukraine right now. There's no way to justify all them men, women, and children, all them little children, and all them daycare centers, and all them hospitals, and all that stuff, with the Russian government bombing them people like that. Those people didn't do nothing to President Putin. Those people don't serve no threat to President Putin. A little child that's less than 2 years old, that child's going to serve some sort of a threat to the Russian government? Or an elderly person that barely can't get around? That person's going to serve a threat?
Reporting at the time, the contemporaneous reporting being that Putin had invited this unit back responsible for the massacres in Bucha and given them awards and medals, that it was precisely the way Vladimir Putin wanted this war in Ukraine and against Ukrainian civilians waged. Do you believe he's paid a price for that is adequate?
No.
No, not yet, Nicole. And he must be held to account. And all of the things that Ali was just talking about, that's exactly right. That has to go on. But you've just identified a gap in the system. There is now not a way, there's no court that is able to prosecute Vladimir Putin for the crime of aggression. The crime of aggression, Cole, is the fundamental crime. It is the basis for all the it's basis for the crimes of atrocities and war crimes, genocide even. The crime of aggression is the fundamental one, and that's the responsibility of one man, of President Putin. And to take him, to be able to go after him, hold him accountable, there needs to be.
I disagree.
There needs to be.
It's not just one man no more. Now, it originally started out with just one man. But whenever you're sitting there and you're looking at that man sitting there talking, and there's a room full of about 300 or 400 people that we can witness and see on TV because they let, I guess, the recording out to the general public. And those people are sitting there, the majority of them, with smiles on their face, and none of them is resisting what that man is talking about. Then that automatically puts them, the other people that's in that same room, in the same category as their leader. It wouldn't be no different if you had somebody committing a crime in front of your house that was robbing somebody or beating somebody up or stripping off the clothes off of a young girl or a young boy and raping them, and you stood idly by with a telephone in your hand, that all you had to do was call the proper authorities, but you sat idly by and was entertained by you watching what you was watching. Now you have become an accessory to the crime. Why? Because you did not resist or try to stop what was going on. That's what I'm talking about with the heavenly kingdom. God would not be considered a righteous, holy, eternal, glorious God if he would allow for Lucifer and those that followed after Lucifer in the supernatural realm, in the spirit realm, if he did not have a punishment and a penalty for those that committed such acts. That's the reason why that I continue to lean towards the Lord Jesus Christ and his teachings, because I know, without a shadow of a doubt, that various miracles has taken place in my life that validates a living, righteous, holy God. For we serve not a God of the dead, but a God of the living. And there's no way humanly possible that I could be sitting here talking to you right now, making this video, if God did not exist. Now, you can look at my files of all the close encounters that I've been through, life-death experiences, and you can say, oh, it's all coincidence. Well, believe what you want to believe. I can only put out what I know to put out. I can only tell you what I know to tell you that has occurred in my testimony. I can't tell you that I've seen God, because you know what? I've never seen God. I've never seen God. I hope one day I do get to see God. I've never been in heaven. I've never seen golden streets. I've never seen pearls of gates and all the other things that it describes in the Bible. But obviously somebody must have seen those things, because they documented those things and put them in the Bible. And there's been thousands and thousands and thousands of other witnesses that has had those life-altering experiences that claims that they went into heaven and seen the same things. As a matter of fact, my mother, after her grieving because of her son's death, it wasn't until about a year that she was caught up in a vision that she actually witnessed and seen her son that was in heaven. And after that, she quit grieving. I mean, she was heavily, heavily grieving for her son to the point that she just couldn't get over it. She would break down. I don't even see how she held a job at that time without damaging herself or injuring herself. But after God showed her a picture of heaven, and after God showed her her son in heaven, she had a spirit of ease. And she quit grieving and she went on about her life. the point that I'm trying to make is this. There was a reason why God done what God done in bringing punishment to the Luciferian Lucifer that done what they done in challenging the kingdom to begin with. And if we, as Christian society, don't have as much hate in our hearts against sin as we do love in our hearts for the Heavenly Father, I question whether or not your relationship is authentically a godly relationship. Now, does that mean that you're not going to make failures and you're never going to make mistakes? No. Does that mean you're immediately going to be able to go out here and walk on water and turn water into wine and raise the dead? No. No, it does not. But what it does mean is you are striving towards the same affections and the same characteristics as what Jesus was striving for, because even he himself told his disciples that none be perfect or none be good other than the Father who sent him. Putting things in the right perspective. Once more, Jesus spoke sometimes metaphorically, sometimes Jesus spoke spiritually, sometimes Jesus spoke literally, sometimes Jesus spoke both at the same time. There's different concepts in the teachings of the Bible. And unless you've been taught accurately, you're never going to be able to get it. You'll swing at it and miss it every time by 3 foot. So what this individual is telling you pertaining to it just being Mr. Putin, I disagree with. Now, whenever it first all started, whenever he first initiated this move, even then, it wasn't just only Putin. He had his lieutenants and his generals and those below him that could have retaliated against an illegal act against going to war with men, women, and children. But did they? No. So because they didn't, that makes them an accessory to the crime that Putin originally started or developed. So whenever you look at Putin making that little speech right before, I think they released the material out to the public like an hour or so before Biden made his speech, or vice versa, I don't know which. But whenever you look at that room and you look at about probably 700-800 people in that one room listening to Putin, and you see their smiles and the way that they're reacting and the way that they're responding to the things that their leader is talking about, proof is in the pudding. Proof is in the pudding. If they would have all in that one room had rushed him at one time, yeah, there was probably going to be a bloodshed, an onslaught. I'm pretty sure he had his people all lined up with machine guns and everything else that would have went in there towards mowing them down. But somebody out of that 500, 600, 700, 800 people, somebody would have got to President Putin. Somebody would have taken him down, even at the expense of killing 200 or 300 or 400 people. Somebody would have got to him. Did they do that? No. No, they did not do that.
International Tribunal to prosecute the crime of aggression, and the UN General Assembly can establish such a crime, such a court to prosecute that crime. That needs to happen, and that's a high priority for the Ukrainians.
Russia still sits on the UN Security Council, though. I mean, we're a long way toward the UN assembling a tribunal to prosecute Putin, are we?
Well, yeah, you got
You're
to
a long way,
catch
and of course won't happen in the Security Council.
Right.
It'll have to go to the General Assembly, and there's got to be a lot of work done to be able to pass a resolution to get that done. But the point is that needs to start.
Yeah.
President Putin cannot go off. He has to be held accountable, and this is the way to begin to find the way to hold him accountable.
Ambassador, you were the first person on this program to educate me to the thing that has borne out, to how skilled and adept the Ukrainian military is as a byproduct or of not just their skill and training, but their experience, that they've been at war now for many years. And I have quoted you over and over again because it has borne out now over the 10, 11, 12 months since you said it. But I wonder if you could give us your analysis of how the Ukrainian military is faring on the battlefield and what they need to prevail?
So you're right, Nicole. Many of us knew that they would fight. Many of us knew that they would draw their strength from the Ukrainian people. That's where this is a fight of all of Ukraine against this aggression. So the military takes its strength, takes its motivation, and takes its success from the Ukrainian people. So they've done extremely well. They started off with what they had, and the arms have come, the weapons have come. To the administration's credit, it's gone from javelins all the way up to HIMARS. It's gone from Stingers all the way up to Patriots. It's gone from no armor all the way up to Abrams tanks. So the trend is exactly right, and that's what the Ukrainian military needs. The Ukrainian military can break through the Russian lines. It can break through the Russian lines. People say that the Russian offensive has begun. Well, it's pretty paltry. It's pretty weak, and the Ukrainian counteroffensive is mounting. They are preparing their units with these new weapons, and they can win. They can break through. So the Ukrainian military has fought brilliantly, doggedly. It's hard, they're exhausted, and they've got another big push in them.
Ambassador Taylor, are you satisfied with what you've seen the U.S. government and specifically the Pentagon give the Ukrainians to work with? I know the Pentagon would say it shouldn't all be on us. There are other Western allies that can support, but just specifically what our country has done, or do you feel that Ukraine is still being asked to fight and win with an arm tied behind its back?
So I wouldn't say arm tied behind its back. And I would say that the United States has done an amazing job of getting these new weapons, as I say, all the way up the ladder. There's a couple of rungs left on that ladder. These long-range artillery, rockets, long-range that need to come. That's what the Ukrainians need to break through. So, yes, I think our military has done an amazing job. I think Secretary Austin, by organizing 50 nations, mostly 30 of them NATO nations, but 20 more nations beyond NATO, that organization has made a big difference. And that needs to continue. And they need to go up a couple of more rungs, and soon this counteroffensive that the Ukrainians are about to undertake needs those tanks, and needs those long-range artillery, needs the air defense, needs the drones, and they need it right now.
Ambassador, I won't debase your stature by reading it to you, but Donald Trump put out a missive. He doesn't tweet, but it said something about World War III is closer than it's ever been now. He then attacks a corrupt globalist establishment that has botched every major foreign policy decision. You served as an ambassador when he was there. A lot of people who were in his administration in the national security agencies have suggested that it would have been nothing less than disastrous for Ukraine if he was still president. Do you share that assessment?
I do. I think the United States would not have put up the same support for Ukraine that we've seen, that we just talked about. It would not have led an international coalition. It would not have brought on allies. The alliances were not big in the previous administration. Alliances are key to Ukrainians winning this battle. So I think it would have been very different.
Kevin, let me, with that in mind, ask you to speak to the impact of this week for President Zelensky. As the ambassador and Ali have both pointed out, Ukraine is fighting and winning on the battlefield with this very skilled military, but also with what it is fighting for, and the spirit of and the resilience and the resolve of the people there. How much does a visit from an American president sort of turn up the volume on all those things that they need to get through this winter?
Well, I imagine it does significantly. I mean, Ukraine has done a lot of things on the battlefield. They've also been great at social media, and boy, did they take this and run with it. It seems to be an enormous morale boost. It's exactly what they've wanted, and we'll see what it does. Ali mentioned the Munich Security Conference at the top. I was at the conference this week, and all the questions I've heard you ask, Nicole, are right on spot, but they lead me to a general kind of conclusion that things are just still so uncertain. there's such a gray area. Nobody knows how long the war is going to go on for. Nobody knows just how much more advanced weaponry the United States and allies are willing to give beyond the tanks that took them months and months and months to agree to give. Whether they'll get to the jets that some folks say that they want and need. Nobody knows how the war will end, whether it's at a negotiating table or a protracted conflict. And I think there's a lot of discontention among, the allies. I mean, even at that conference, from Kamala Harris's speech in the hall, in the main hall, to what you heard in the sidebar rooms was quite different. People just aren't believing that the West is going to stick it out to the end. They're worried. So they're worried of the reality that money isn't infinite, weapons aren't infinite. There has to be an ending somewhere to it. So for Biden to go to Ukraine, it at least buys them the time that they need to get through any Russian offensive coming their way.
And it has to be causing some consternation, Kevin, to see China. I don't know if cozying up is the right word, but at least not running away from Vladimir Putin's Russia.
Yeah, this is a major shift where Beijing has kept itself at arm's length and at times has been willing to break with Russia. Now they're muddying the waters even more, and it seems in a deliberate and calculated way, coming right after all the balloon incident. But really, it's been a long trend where now, even in the statements this week, you see. The visit by Minister Yi, you see reports that she is going to visit Moscow. At the same time, statements saying that, Beijing doesn't support Russia's invasion. They're using every chance they can to wrap the Americans and wrap Biden with it. I mean, you can see the Chinese Foreign Ministry's Twitter feed, and it's just one tongue-in-cheek excuse to hit the Americans after another. So, it's clearly an alignment that no one else in the world wants, but Beijing is willing to take. They're not seeing any negatives. Otherwise, they might not be doing it.
And Ali, I know that where you are, they're acutely aware of all of these geopolitical posturings. They, as Kevin has said, they keep an eye on social media, so we don't have to. Tell me what they believe the timeline is for prevailing, and it's not a straight line, right? If this, then that. If they have the weapons they need, then they feel they will. So just take me through some of those scenarios from the Ukrainian perspective.
Well, it was the Polish president who sort of articulated this, I think, on Friday, where he said, if we celebrate another anniversary of this next year, Russia will feel emboldened to target another state. Now, it seems incomprehensible that after being mired in Ukraine, not a NATO country, for a year, that Russia would try with Poland or Lithuania or Latvia or something like that. But those countries, those people on the front lines of NATO, believe that to be a real possibility, and they need this to end. They need to not think. They joined NATO many years ago, and they think that that's supposed to protect them. Here in Ukraine, they believe that they are the flank. They believe they are the border between Russia and those NATO countries on the eastern flank. And they sort of said things like, to get to you, they will have to go through us first. And we will stand here. We will defend you from the Russians coming to you, but you need to help us. You need to give us the things we need. They keep saying, Ukrainians to little kids will tell you. They know all the weaponry. They know all the names of the things that they're getting and the things that they want. They don't want Western soldiers. They don't want NATO soldiers. They've said this a million times. We'll train our pilots. They want their pilots trained on F-16s, but they are willing to fight this war till the end. The two things they tell me is we will fight it till the end and we will win. The other thing is they don't want a negotiated settlement. They want Russia to leave. Joe Biden said that if Russia stops fighting this war, it will end. If Ukraine stops fighting this war, Ukraine will end.
It's an unbelievable state of affairs, and what a privilege to have all three of you. MSNBC's Ali Velshi, thank you again for helming these 2 hours yesterday. Ambassador Bill Taylor, a pleasure to get to talk to you. Kevin Barron, thank you. A pleasure to get to talk to you. Thank you for sharing your reporting with us and starting us off this hour. When we come back, as Ukraine fights to keep its country and its democracy together, a top ally of House Speaker Kevin McCarthy is talking about breaking ours into bits. Marjorie Taylor Greene is no longer the fringe of the Republican Party, and she and Vladimir Putin are, at least for now, pushing the same line, the same words, the same message about succession, why it can't be ignored next. Later for us, back to the story that broke in the last hour. Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump have been subpoenaed by special counsel Jack Smith in his investigation into January 6th. The chief investigator from the January 6th Select Committee, Tim Hafey, will be our guest with his reaction to this breaking news. Deadline White House continues after a quick break. Don't go anywhere today.
Thank you for listening. Good luck to all of us. God bless America. God bless our troops. God bless our endeavors. And as we end by saying shalom.